Peace and Safety News Desk, March 22nd. My name is Daniel Valles and welcome to our channel. We are at a very high watch time, so it is important that you review our high watch review playlist if you are new to our channel, and also if you've been here for a while. There is a lot coming together. These videos as we go forward, checking the news and adding on to our studies as we go forward is going to be very light. We're not going to rehearse much of what we have covered. So it is important for you to be aware of what we have studied because we are continuing going forward from there. And today we're just going to be checking some of the recent news, adding on top of everything we have been studying. So it is important that you keep up with what we have been studying. When they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. We are in a unique time that's going to take place before the tribulation, this time where a certain topic of discussion is going to be mentioned in the world, and it's going to be in a notable way. But it's also a warning that sudden destruction is coming. It's on the way. When you hear this, there is going to be a time delay before sudden destruction comes, but once you hear that, you need to be in a heightened alert because sudden destruction is on the way. And it's going to be coming as travail upon a woman with child. That's just an illustration how it will be coming. It will be building in intensity to the arrival of the sudden destruction. So there is a time duration from when you hear that warning to when it comes, but there is going to be a ramping up right before it comes and as it comes. And this is where we see ourselves right now on the world stage in this time of the birth pangs. And we can definitely tell from the reflexes and the contractions right now that when it does come, it's going to be very suddenly. And that is how they are orchestrating it too. And notice that scripture tells us very plainly, when they shall say, they, the children of darkness, as talked about later in that chapter. They are the ones talking about it, but they are also the ones behind it, as we have seen in Revelation 17. When they shall say peace and safety, they're not talking about this in a positive sense of, oh, peace has finally come to the world. No, that's never going to happen. And particularly once the tribulation starts, it's all going to be going downhill too. The second horse of Revelation is coming to take peace from the earth. Why is peace and safety going to be such a notable keyword? Why is it something that is distinct that we can say, wow, they have finally said what 1 Thessalonians 5 is talking about? It will be noticeable because peace and safety will be talked about because that will be the subject of the hour. It's not just going to be some lighthearted platitudes that they're talking about. No, they're going to be talking about it. They, at very high levels, are going to be talking about it across the world because it will be the subject of the hour. The need for peace, the need for safety and security. Why? Because those two subjects are what is most threatened at the hour when they are talking about it. And that is what should catch our attention right now. The subject will be talked about because the reality of the need for those will be very present. Because the realization that there is a very real possibility for sudden destruction to come. And then you're also going to see birth pangs start to accelerate in contractions that really further elevate those same discussions and those same topics. Of peace is in a very perilous position. Safety is in a very perilous position. Things are ramping up into the world where peace and safety are about to be taken from the earth. This is what we were warned about very specifically, a very specific code word of what the world will be talking about, what will be the subject of the hour as the world senses that sudden destruction is coming. And also the children of darkness know that definitely sudden destruction is coming because they're orchestrating it. But it's going to be the subject across the whole world. Children of light, the children of darkness too. Everybody's going to be talking about World War III, if you will, is on everybody's mind right now. That is the subject of the hour. Now, how close is that sudden destruction coming? The Bible doesn't say, but the intimation is that you're going to see it, and you are going to see it. It will be coming as travail upon a woman and child. So once you start to see it coming as travail upon the woman and child, once you start seeing it increasing in the contraction, so to speak, and the intensity, and also the increased severity of the subject of peace and safety, when it starts getting very perilous that, yes, it's about to evaporate peace and safety from the world, you are going to be able to tell how small that window is. It's not a large window, but it's not a small window either. And this is something we have to keep in mind where we are right now. We are very anxious for the Lord to return. Yes. We are very anxious to get out of here. Yes. We are very anxious for prophetic events to occur. Yes. But we are aware also that our Father is very merciful and full of grace, not just to the world, to his own servants as well. Judgment is going to start at the house of God. The grace window is going to end before the rapture takes place. Because once the rapture takes place, our grace window for us doing the things that we should have been doing, that's done and over. Once he comes, he's bringing his reward with him. So even our grace window ends before the rapture takes place. And this is something we are told even in this very same chapter, 1 Thessalonians 5. Listen, watch, and be sober. He tells us what we should listen for. He tells us we should watch in a few verses later. And he tells us you will need to be sober. We need to calm down. We need to keep our emotions in check. Prophecy is not a microwave dinner. Yes, the days are going very long right now, but we can also see we are in the time of birth pangs, and we see prophecy being fulfilled every single day now. We actually see the birth pangs increasing every single day now, not being let up at all. We know where we are. We are anxious, yes, but that should remind us the need for soberness. And also an awareness that this time is for us. We are told we will see this time. We are told we will hear this time, and that there will be a time where it's coming. It's not here yet, that sudden destruction. There is going to be a time frame there. Who is that for? It's for the world in a general sense, but it's for us. It's for us, where we can see what time it is and where we can make ourselves ready. You think about the major peace and safety calls that went out on February 23rd and 24th. Very significant. We covered those in our recent videos. I actually showed them video of them saying it out loud. That was just under a month ago. But I look at just this channel, and I look at how many thousands of people the Lord has brought across our path just since then. And how they are now hearing, and they're being brought to attention some of the things that are being unfolded right now that maybe some of the other channels aren't covering, or maybe in a way that they aren't covering. The whole idea of a warning and being aware of sudden destruction is coming, a window, it's for us. God is giving us time so that his own servants can review and reflect on the warning, but also warn others. As we see the day approaching, we are to encourage and to provoke one another into love and to good works. This time, these warnings are not meant to be a microwave event either. The warning and then immediately going into sudden destruction. There's going to be warning, but then, like it's even talked about in that chapter, when you see this, as you see this, watch and be sober. There's going to be a time between the warning and the sudden destruction coming where we will need to be sober. We will need to be watching. We will need to be warning others to watch. We will need to be warning others to be sober, because there's a time frame that is for us. And God has given us this time to put out that message of prophecy being fulfilled. And so there is enough time from the warning to the sudden destruction to reflect and observe that, well, yes, that is that, and we need to spread the message. And then we need to live in light of it. And live in light that every single day we see these tensions increasing, the contractions increasing. The sudden destruction is looming over the world every single day right now. There's really nothing holding it back from occurring today. And the enemy has scripted their daily news broadcasts and the events unfolding to keep a constant tension, but also one that's been building in intensity too. It has not let up. It is not getting better. Every single day, you look at the politicians in the news and you're like, wow, you're just making it worse. Well, we know you're making it worse on purpose, but it's just incredible to see that every single day they are doing something to throw another log on the fire. This is where we are right now. Always keep this in mind. We are in the birth pangs right now. We're not waiting for them to start. We're in them right now. So this is why you need to review the timeline, the wide view timeline, also the short view timeline. Links are in the description box. Check them out every single day. Again, be reminded, where are we? Where are we? Why are we at this time? Why has the Lord shown us the signs about the great and terrible day approaching? Because it's approaching. So we need to live in light of it. And he's going to give us enough time where we can live in light of it, where we can warn our fellow servants, where we can encourage them to trim their lamps, to rise up, to shine bright, to go out and meet the bridegroom. There will be time to do that. Not a lot of time. And it's certainly been just about a month since we've heard the major peace and safety calls kick off. And things have definitely accelerated from there. So we know there is a duration of time. But it's going to be relatively a short time. And we see that the threat is very present even today. That sudden destruction could come today. And even the world has that expectation that things could fly off the handle really quick any moment now. So again, review the timeline. There's multiple things on there. And again, it reminds us of the celestial picture that's ongoing right now. Jupiter is still at the water stream, at the stars that are associated as the bubbles in the stream of water that is poured out of Aquarius's vase. So we are at a very, very important time. Jupiter is coming onto the scene as a morning star right now too. Beautiful pictures which remind us again in the last page of the Bible, the last chapter of the Bible, talking about Jesus Christ. He is the root and the offspring of David and the bright and morning star. And certainly it brings our memory back to how our attention was brought to look up and to lift up our heads at the Star of Bethlehem events. And here we are on the last page of the Bible looking at the one who is the root and offspring of David, the one who is the Lion of the tribe of Judah, but he's also the bright and morning star, and he's the one who pours out the living water. We see so many reminders of all this right now on the celestial clock, and then we look down on the geopolitical level and we see they're saying exactly what we were warned we would see. And we are here at the last page of the Bible where we are reminded that he is coming quickly and he is bringing his reward with him. And there is also the very sober warning on the last page of the Bible too, that we should be wise servants so that we can escape all the plagues that are coming during the tribulation once sun destruction does come. So there's a lot that's summed up literally on the last page of the Bible, and we can see so many reminders. We can see that presently in our world there are tangible, real demonstrations of prophecy unfolding all around us, and also declared on the heavens on the celestial clock. Definitely check out the timeline. Let's zoom in a bit. Our last video we covered the events of March 20th, ending with Zelensky says World War III is assured if negotiations with Russia break down. They are constantly setting up the world that things are going to be easily heading toward World War III if things don't get better. They keep reminding the world, hey, keep this in mind, World War III is about to break out if things don't get better. And then of course they don't do things that would make it better, they do things that make it worse. March 21st. There's an increasing large trucking and farmer protests in Germany and Spain in response to sanctions. And especially since the sanctions were rolled out in response to Russia going into Ukraine, gas prices have gone up, especially diesel. But now, not even a month later, we're seeing growing protests in Germany and Spain and other places who are protesting the high fuel costs that has on shipping and commerce. It has huge disruptions on us, and there are already protests of saying this is stupid. Why? We're hurting ourselves, and it's not having any effect on Russia what they're doing at all. We're hurting ourselves. So you're seeing a growing, in multiple nations, these growing protests against the harm that is being done to them. Russia bans Facebook and Instagram, especially once Facebook started allowing certain comments toward Russian people and individuals. That really was the nail in their coffin. The Poland Prime Minister suggests to confiscate Russian-owned property like Italy has stolen yachts. And of course, it does not help relations with Russia when a certain country starts publicly talking about, oh, let's take Russian-owned property. Again, every single day they're doing something that actually ticks off the bear. And you've probably noticed there's been an increase in animosity, not just toward Russia, but Russians, Russian culture. In many different ways, it's absurd what's going on right now. But it's a deliberate drumming up to antagonize the bear, a deliberate antagonizing. They're not trying to make it better, they're trying to make it worse. And they're drumming it up on multiple different levels right now. Also on the 21st, more general notices that the Kremlin may have certainly gamed using Russia's foreign reserves as bait. And what I mean by that is you're starting to see a lot more articles come out in financial newspapers right now that they're really suspicious that this is going to end the dollar's domination as a world reserve currency. Again, because the West is demonstrating that it's a liability to hold their currency, to hold your currency in their reserves, to do interactions on their systems at all. The West is demonstrating that they're a liability. And one of the largest ways that they demonstrated they were a liability was by seizing Russia's foreign reserves. So especially in financial newspapers, you're really starting to see how they're starting to question, this is a nail in the dollar's coffin. What has happened is actually going to hurt the dollar permanently. But people are also starting to suspect that, you know what, Russia probably did this deliberately. They could have diversified their foreign reserves before they went into conflict, knowing they knew that America would likely seize their foreign reserves. So why didn't they diversify? Why didn't they move it into something else, like gold or other commodities? why did they leave such a large bait of foreign reserves so susceptible to being seized by the West? Some financial people are starting to suspect that, wow, Russia might have deliberately put it out there as bait so that the West will show their hand of how thug-like they are. And they will seize and they will steal and they will act like pirates. It's a liability to use their system. And like I've constantly said, what's going on right now is far beyond Ukraine. It's between the East and the West. The West is throwing blows at the East with Russia, but Russia has also been having very strategic moves on the financial playing field as well too. And a lot of people are starting to suspect that Russia is doing things very deliberately to kill the currency of the West. Again, what's going on in Ukraine, that's just a proxy. That's just an excuse for both sides to do what they're doing. But the battle is really far greater than that. It's on the world playing field. And the Kremlin definitely knows what they're doing. They're going for the jugular of the West. It's not about Ukraine. They're going for the jugular of the West to destroy and bring down the dollar as the world's reserve currency. I hope you can see that. Russia's actions and them actually going slow in Ukraine, the slower they go, the more desperate and hysterical the West and the EU and NATO act. The more they start showing themselves out for who they really are. Start showing that they are an extreme liability and all other nations really need to start aligning with the East. Because the days of the dollar are not long at all. It's not about Ukraine. It's about realigning the world's nations right now. Far greater. Kiev tells all cities under siege, including Mariupol, there can be no talk of any surrender. End quote. And this is fascinating because that's what we covered in our last video, and then I checked the news shortly after that, and they're even blatantly telling them don't surrender. And why do they have to tell them don't surrender? Why does Kiev have to reinforce don't surrender? Because that is what they're talking about. That's what the soldiers are talking about. That's what the battalions there in those surrounded cities, that's what they're talking about. Why? Because it's a very real threat, and we talked about this in our last video. Russia's tactics are completely different than the West and the American. They are surrounding the troops, wanting them to surrender, forcing them to surrender, actually going slow because they actually want the enemy to desert. They want them to surrender. It makes it easier on them. They don't have to waste ammunition or put themselves in danger. It is in their best interest to produce conditions that bring about surrender or desertion. And you can tell that this tactic is working because the talk of surrender is so great right now that Kiev is having to remind their own soldiers, don't surrender. Don't surrender those key cities. Why? Because it's actually being talked about right now, heavily considered. And this is also very important for considering the situation overall. We're not waiting for Russia to take over all of Ukraine. Russia knows it doesn't even have to take Kiev. It doesn't have to take certain cities, and that's why largely they've been going around several cities and then coming back to them later. They have strategic military objectives. That's why they call it what they call it. Russia knows all they have to do is bring the country to a tipping point. They don't have to take over the whole country. They just have to come to a tipping point where enough of their army surrenders that there's an avalanche of morale across the rest of the army, where the rest of the army suddenly realizes, whoa, things are going downhill, Russia has the advantage. And then once that tipping point is passed, the rest is going to be easy. The rest is really going to be a mop-up. But Russia is pushing toward a tipping point. And if they can get large numbers of the Ukrainian soldiers to surrender, that brings them very close to a tipping point on multiple levels. And also keep in mind, Ukraine, I believe, is the third most corrupt nation there in Europe. That's well known. Zelensky, everybody in office, the whole government, most people there in Ukraine, it's a very corrupt nation. So you have to keep that in mind with the nation at war too. The tipping point is going to be a whole lot earlier than most people think, particularly from a Western point of view. Because it's so corrupt, what does that say about the moral standing of the individuals there in the country, in the army, of the soldiers, whatnot? And then that moral standing also gives you an idea of the morale standing. Because a nation that is morally corrupt will also have less cohesion. Because there will be the greater propensity for people to look out for themselves. They look out for themselves. They're partially interested in their nation, defending their land and whatnot. but they're so corrupt already, and it's no story of so much corruption and skimming being sent off to private accounts, whatnot, and weapons being sold, and there's so much corruption there that it's rooted throughout their society that they're going to look out for themselves first. And this is what's being played on by getting them to surrender. The Russians know that if they can get a good bulk of the Ukrainian army to surrender, that's going to send a very strong message, because you're going to have a lot of other morally corrupt individuals and soldiers in that country who are going to suddenly realize the situation for them, and they're going to be more worried about their own skin than the nation's and any patriotic notions. They're going to be worried about their own skin. And they're going to be like rats fleeing from a sinking ship. When a nation is corrupt, it will fall so much faster. Keep that in mind with where the tipping point is going to be in this whole situation. A lot of people are waiting till, maybe once Russia takes Kiev, then I'll be worried that they're taking out the whole thing. No, the tipping point's going to come a whole lot sooner. They don't even have to take Kiev. And they know that. They know that. That's why they're trying to force these large surrenders, which are over in the east. Over in the east. Once they do that, the rest is going to be mop up, because the rats will be fleeing from the sinking ship. March 22nd. Russia warning about possible false flags by Ukrainian neo-Nazis on U.S. and Western diplomatic sites in Lviv, which is closer to the Polish border. And you may remember when the embassies starting evacuated from Kiev, they moved to Lviv, and then eventually, once the military operation got underway, then they evacuated into Poland too. But now Russia, take notice, Russia is warning that the neo-Nazis might stage an attack on the remaining diplomatic interests there in Lviv, and try to blame that on the Russians to try to get those Western countries who are represented by those diplomatic missions there, to try to get them pulled into this conflict too. Russia is the one who's warning about these false flags here, saying, hey, all you Western nations still over there in Lviv, be aware something might happen to you, and it's going to be the neo-Nazis' fault. It's not us. We're warning you to be aware of what may happen. They're trying to bait you and bring you into this situation. Also on the 22nd, one of Europe's biggest car plants, a Volkswagen plant, halts production due to supply chain issues, some of it from Ukraine. A good portion of the shortages is with the semiconductors still, but they do acknowledge part of those shortages is also automotive parts from Ukraine. And again, this is making a lot of news because this is Europe's biggest car plant. So a lot of disruption. What's going on in Ukraine is affecting the rest of the world, and then you throw the different sanctions on top of that too, and a royal mess. Nobody's making this situation better at all. Russia's Gazprom books no extra gas supplies to Europe on the Yamal-Europe pipeline. Now the Nord Stream 1 is the main pipeline to Europe, and that is always running at 100%. The Yamal-Europe one is kind of a surge line. They can do extra supplies to Europe. But the news is noting that they have no bids, nobody booking gas on that supply line, so they're not going to be using that. And this just gives you an idea that the gas is still flowing in the Nord Stream 1, but the extra supplies, Germany and Europe, they're not topping off the gas supplies that they have. Also on the 21st, 22nd, Biden says U.S. must lead New World Order. And because he said that, New World Order became one of Twitter's trending topics on Monday. And of course, this news finally came out on the 22nd as they observed those trends building. New World Order, and Biden talking about the need for a New World Order with the U.S. leading it at this time. Again, you're seeing a build-up and a play on the East versus West, and the West solidifying together in their efforts against the East, which means the East is also solidifying against the West. You're seeing them butt heads together. But it definitely caught the world's attention that New World Order was trending on Twitter at this exact time. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. The White House will discuss at the NATO meeting on March 24th the potential use of nuclear weapons with allies and partners in the context of the crisis in Ukraine. And this is very important when you remember back when the peace and safety calls were stated right at that time was when Putin put their nuclear forces on high alert, their highest alert. And they're still there. And so we've seen further and increasing talk of nuclear weapons use in World War III during this time. But now here publicly they're stating on March 22nd that at an upcoming meeting in 2 days, they will definitely be talking about the specific use of nuclear weapons and potential uses for nuclear weapons in context of this whole situation. So again, that throws gasoline on the fire here to everything that's going on. If you're going to talk about that, yeah, okay, don't keep it quiet. You don't need to broadcast to the whole world that you're thinking of options on how to use nuclear weapons during this situation, which is what we talked about in our last video. Because once things start getting desperate and once they start giving out the spiel that, oh, these sanctions have reached their limit, we need to send a stronger message, then you're going to have to resort to stronger means, which puts on the table that there might be some preemptive use of nuclear weapons being used, even if just for sending a message somewhere. So very, very alarming that on the 22nd they're admitting that they're going to be talking about this. This is on the table. Possible uses of nuclear weapons in context of this situation. And the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is the one who has said this, and he's not very reputable for honesty. So there's a lot of shenanigans going on right now, and Russia knows his character and the Biden administration and also Hunter Biden's involvement in Ukraine. And Russia's fully aware of what's going on. So when these public statements are made by some of these individuals, Russia takes them as much more nefarious than perhaps the average person does. Because these are statements being said very deliberately. Statements being made with ill intention, too. Russia knows that. Now, on March 24th, Biden will be over in Europe in Brussels for a NATO meeting and then also a G7 meeting. Both of these where they're talking about deterrence and defense efforts against Russia. So a major NATO meeting with major leaders. Biden is going over there. He's leaving on the 23rd for the meeting on the 24th. So there's going to be a lot of leaders there. And then the G7 meeting as well. And then on the 25th, Biden will be visiting Warsaw, Poland as well. So this has also caught people's attention with Russia warning about possible false flags with some of the diplomatic missions there in Lviv in Ukraine. But there's also people who are warning Biden's going over to Europe. Major leaders are getting together. This would be a really bad time for another false flag on another front, possibly against Biden. And so there's multiple people warning this time right now where we are this week is ripe for some really bad false flags. And if these false flags happen, things are going to hit the fan almost right away. And so again, we can't say yay or nay, what about it? We can just say it's being put out in the news and it's being hyped, and there's definitely a real concern that, yeah, if something happened, it would not go down good at all. And we've also seen over the previous weeks, as the different nations have been donating javelins and different man-pad rockets and the different armaments to shoot down planes and to shoot tanks and stuff, there's been a lot of concern by people saying, hey, you're donating all these hundreds upon hundreds of weapons to Ukraine, which is known, fully known that it's a corrupt country. And it's fully known that some of these soldiers are going to be selling those weapons on the black market. And there's a very real possibility that some of these man-pads and these javelins are going to fall into terrorist hands that threaten commercial aviation in Europe. And the U.S.'s response was, well, the risk is worth it. So the threat was brought up, particularly with corrupt Ukraine, and the U.S. acknowledged that. And so as there's talk of false flags going around and people flying into certain areas, a lot of people are wondering if we're being set up for something. It's hard to say, we don't know, but we can certainly see with what could possibly go down that things could get possibly really bad really quickly, which could instantly bring the West and NATO and Europe into a conflict really quickly too, with even the potential use of nuclear weapons. So again, keep a sober reflection on what is the storyline. Where are they taking things? Where are they taking things? Not in a good direction. We know that already from Scripture. So again, review the timeline, review the events coming together right now. They're heightened. We are in the birth pangs right now. We are already foretold several months ago, giving us time to spread the word, make videos, the different watchmen to get out the word that that great and terrible day is approaching. And it's approaching really quickly, and especially as we have heard the calls to peace and safety, that definitely marked the ramp up of the birth pangs. Where it's been obvious around the world, the birth pangs are starting. They're leading in not a good direction, and our leaders are not helping the situation either. In fact, they seem to actually be making it worse on purpose, but the whole world has this looming over them right now. an expectation that things can go hot really quickly, and if they do, it could, from the storyline, be the end of civilization. Right now, prophetically, we are in the days of Noah and Lot. And this is what Christ emphasized. The Son of Man will be coming while people are still buying and selling, building, planting, marrying, going on. Life was normal. Nothing major has disrupted them. In fact, he's going to be coming at a time where it's going to surprise the world. He's going to catch some of his servants unawares because they weren't paying attention to the celestial warnings. They weren't paying attention to the watchmen. They were hardly paying attention to the news. Maybe they even might have been paying attention to news and be concerned about the different events. But the world events, when Christ comes, will not have reached the final point of having gone hot yet. This is what we need to keep in mind with where we are right now. He's coming during the birth pangs, before the sudden destruction is born, before the sudden destruction arrives. He will be coming while people are, yes, concerned about where things may be going, but they haven't fully gone to the tipping point yet. Christ is coming before the tipping point. This is what we need to soberly keep in mind as we occupy till he comes, as we redeem the time till he comes. Soberly be reminded he's coming on a normal day, a perfectly normal day. And that's going to catch some of his servants unawares because they were not preparing themselves. They were not living as though their Lord and Master is about to return. And this is why he told us, you won't know the day or the hour that the Son of Man cometh. You will have a very good idea, though. And you also see where things are going. You also see you're in the birth pangs. You also know what is coming next. So as we know, as Scripture tells us on all these fronts, we look at where we are right now and how they are deliberately accelerating things. And they don't know the day or hour either, so they're having to stretch and draw their story out slowly, but it's also building. Notice how it is building every single day. It's building with these anxiety about nuclear war and making it more obvious every single day that that's the direction things could be going, but it hasn't reached quite the tipping point where people will stop buying and selling or stop putting off planting or building or different things like that. It's not quite enough to make them change life as normal, but it is getting very close to that tipping point. Very close. So that's where we are right now. When we look at the celestial clock, the geopolitical clock, the last generation clock, and the biblical clock. And friend, that's what I want you to see. That's what I want you to review. Definitely check out our resources in the description box, these PDFs. They go over a lot of these instructions that Christ gave us to help temper and sober our expectation while we wait, while we occupy, while we redeem the time, while we make ourselves ready, knowing that our bridegroom cometh. So definitely download these resources. Check out the links in the description box. Check out the videos. Everything there is specifically tailored for you to help you live in light of our Lord's return. You can find these resources at rapturelibrary.com, rapturelibrary.com. We have heard so many trumpet calls at midnight. We already know the bridegroom cometh. Go ye out to meet him. That is the instruction. After you hear the warning, you will hear things. Hear things, just like them saying peace and safety. You will hear them say things. We have heard so many trumpet calls at midnight that have told us in so many ways the bridegroom cometh. So what comes next? Go ye out to meet him. That is the time frame after you hear those warnings, after you hear those trumpet calls. It's for us to rise up and go ye out to meet him. And friend, always keep this forefront that we are in the birth pangs right now. We are past the trumpet calls at midnight. Our bridegroom is just over the hill. We can hear his footsteps. He's that close. He's nigh at the door. We can see that reflected in the world news right now, that he is nigh even at the door. Sudden destruction's also nigh at the door too. We should not be living for this world, caught up in the cares of this life, punch drunk on what the world is chasing after right now. No, we know our bridegroom cometh, so we are going to rise up. We're going to trim our lamps so that we shine bright, and we are going to go out to meet him, to draw nigh to him with a true heart, with a genuine heart, with a purified heart, with a sanctified heart, with a beautiful heart that he desires to see. Supping with him, fellowshipping with him, watching and praying always. That is our fellowship with him, increasing our fellowship with him during this time. Going forward out to meet him, hearing him, heeding him, loving him, and serving him first and highest above all else. Redeeming the time till he comes. Maranatha.